Hello, fellow mystery seekers. MsStoryMystery here, and tonight I've brewed up a cauldron of 6 chilling tales that will rattle your bones. Among them, we'll delve into encounters with a ghostly feline, recount a spine-tingling weekend spent house-sitting a haunted estate, and unravel an unsettling late-night rendezvous at a deserted bus stop. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with friends who love a good mystery. Now, let's dive into the unexplained together. Back when I was a kid, around 8 years old, I had this weird thing happen to me. One night, I woke up and saw someone kneeling at the end of my bed. It looked like a woman, and for a second, I thought it was my sister. But then I realized it wasn't her. Strangely, I wasn't scared. It felt more like, what's going on here? So I said, hello? And poof, she disappeared. The weird part was that the figure looked kind of blurry, like an old, faded photo. Now you could easily say it was just my imagination, and honestly, I've doubted it myself. But deep down, I still think I saw some kind of spirit. Now, growing up, my family was big on ghost stories. My grandma, for example, used to say she heard a banshee wail when her own mom passed away. Then there's my dad, who always talks about the haunted house he grew up in. Every night, everyone in the house, including his 5 siblings, would hear footsteps on the stairs, like someone coming home. No one ever saw anything, just heard the steps. Turns out, the house used to belong to a cop who worked odd hours. I guess he passed away and my family moved in after that. One of my uncles swears he saw the officer sitting at the kitchen table one morning, but I think he was too young to remember clearly. Then there's this story about my other uncle's friend who spent the night when they were in their late teens. He heard the footsteps and got so freaked out, he ran home. My dad said his eyes were as big as saucers. They finally left the house after my grandpa passed away. It was close to the cemetery where he was buried. My grandma started having dreams about him getting up from his grave and walking to the house. After that, they packed up and moved, leaving the creepy memories behind. I used to be pretty skeptical about anything paranormal until one bizarre weekend of house sitting for my aunt and uncle shook my convictions. They were heading out of town for a few days and asked if I could look after their house and dogs. Since I was staying with my grandparents for the summer and had just gotten my driver's license at 16, having a place to myself during vacation sounded like a sweet deal. Packed with my PlayStation, some rented games, movies, and snacks, I went to their place. The first night was quiet, but an odd feeling lingered in the house. It wasn't anything specific, just a general uneasiness. Maybe because it was my first time alone without my aunt and uncle. Around 1 a.m., after letting the dogs out, I went to bed, making sure all the locks were secured. The next morning, despite the uneasiness persisting, I got up, made coffee, and let the dogs out. That feeling of being watched wouldn't shake off, even though I knew I was alone. Deciding to shake off the weird vibes, I planned an afternoon bike ride with friends. I locked up, put the dogs in their crates, and headed out. After about 4 hours, I returned to the house, only to find the dogs in a full-blown panic. Unlike their usual calm demeanor, they were shaking, foaming at the mouth, and howling. Not the typical excitement of seeing someone after a while. This was different. Worried, I checked the house for any signs of trouble, but everything seemed fine. It was when I went upstairs to the apartment that my uncle used as an office that things got strange. One of the computers was on, contrary to my uncle's note that he had shut everything off. A little odd, but I brushed it off as a mistake and shut it down before going back downstairs. As the day wore on, watching movies with the dogs, things took an even stranger turn. One of the dogs suddenly stood on the couch, fur on its back raised, growling towards the door to the stairs. This went on for a good 5 to 10 minutes, and nothing I did could distract him. Later, around 11 p.m., both dogs started growling, and this time I heard creaking from upstairs, as if someone was rocking back and forth on a loose floorboard. Frightened, I decided to check, only to find the door to the upstairs unlocked, even though I remembered locking it earlier. Feeling a bit embarrassed for freaking out, I went back downstairs, only for the dogs to start panicking again a few hours later. This time, I heard a dial tone, a modem dialing numbers, attempting to connect. I grabbed a knife, the classic horror movie move, and went upstairs to find nothing. Everything was off and unplugged, just as I had left it. Back downstairs, the noise continued, accompanied by creaking that sounded like footsteps. After enduring this for another half hour, I'd had enough. I loaded up the dogs, locked up, and left. I spent the night at my grandparents', feeling pretty unnerved. I recounted the events to my grandparents the following day, expecting them to think I was crazy. Strangely, they didn't seem surprised. Turns out, my aunt and uncle had their share of weird experiences in that house, including my little cousin seeing a shadow man in his bed and finding the gas stove turned on, leaking gas into the house. I still can't come up with a rational explanation for what happened that weekend. It was just too strange. A few years back, I moved in with some friends, and our place had its fair share of weird happenings. The most head-scratching one involved a ghost cat. See, my friends didn't have any indoor cats, but I kept almost tripping over something that felt like a cat while walking around. It took me a bit to remember there were no actual cats wandering our place, just this odd, ghostly sensation underfoot. Then one day, I heard a rumor from the roomy grapevine. Apparently, there was this ghost cat that would wake people up by walking on them. I was kind of excited about the idea, but eventually forgot all about it. Cut to about 6 months later, and I'm waking up to what feels like a cat walking on me. No indoor cats, mind you. It started around my knees and vanished by the time it hit my chest. It felt light, not like a real cat. When I brought it up with my friends later, they confirmed it was a thing that happened to all of them. Now there was more to our ghostly tale. I once saw what seemed like a ghostly lady. Random, not scary, just a, there's a ghost kind of moment. But the weirdness didn't stop there. Nights in our house sometimes sounded like there was a full-on party happening. Music playing, people chatting and moving about, the whole deal. The thing is, there was no party. It was like we were hosting these bizarre ghost parties. So our everyday life was spiced up with these strange encounters. The ghost cat, the lady apparition, and the ghost parties. Our house turned from the usual, mundane backdrop to a hub for the unexplained, with each odd occurrence adding a layer of mystery to our everyday routines. When I was around 9 or 10 years old, I visited my friend Allison's house. She and her parents were out at her soccer game, which I found out later. Allison's house was 3 lots down the street on the other side, surrounded by a 6-foot fence that opened to the driveway. When she wasn't home, I would wait for her in the backyard and enjoy swinging on her awesome swing set. As I swung, eagerly awaiting Allison's return, I kept an eye on her house through the kitchen, living room, and front window, hoping to see her or her parents approaching. Then, something caught my attention. I noticed a dark, slowly moving figure in the front room. The next few moments felt like an eternity. I stopped swinging and sat still on my favorite swing, no longer feeling happy. With bated breath, I watched the shadowy figure glide across the room. The voice in my head screamed, "No, no, no," as the pitch black silhouette came to a halt. Panic started to take hold of my young mind, and I told myself to remain perfectly still and watched as the figure turned toward me. Although I couldn't see a face or any details, I could sense its malevolent presence, filled with hate. Every hair on my head felt like it was standing on end. Terrified and unable to move, I reassured myself that this couldn't be real. It must be a waking dream. The figure started moving closer, and I involuntarily let out a loud gasp-like scream, sensing its menacing intention. Frozen by the palpable hatred, I looked past the kitchen door towards the driveway, considering my escape options. If the guy emerged from the door, I feared I wouldn't make it past him. I turned my gaze toward the fence, knowing it didn't open on that side but was climbable. We always used to climb it to get to the field. I hadn't been great at climbing it, but I could manage. Glancing back at the window, I saw the shadow man effortlessly slide through it. I screamed as I sprinted toward the field, never looking back. I climbed the fence faster than ever before, falling off the top and landing on my back. I quickly got up and ran as fast as I could back to my house. Upon entering my house, I rushed straight to my room and hid in my closet. I remained there for the next 4 hours until my parents convinced me to come out and eat. Me and my best friend Sarah were hanging out in my family's basement one boring winter night, playing video games. We were also the only ones home because my mom went straight from work to a bar for a few drinks with coworkers. So, Sarah and I thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and have a bit of fun. As we were sitting there opening the first bottle, I heard the door to the garage open and slam shut. Panic struck, and I started looking for places to hide the bottle. Sarah then said, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I heard a few heavy stomps, and my mother yelling out, "Emma, anyone home?" I yelled back up the stairs, "Yep, just hanging out in the basement." I heard a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yelled out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I replied while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle, "Yep, just give me a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" she yelled back in a bit more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off from my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was very open to all family and friends, and the voice, it was just wrong. Like, it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't put my finger on. Weirded out, I replied back, "Just Sarah." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide that bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now, as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I looked over to where the door to the garage is and also the kitchen right next to it, and it's black. Pitch black. All the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen, yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I felt the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicked in full force. I had to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I ran back downstairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Sarah says. "My mom's not home," I replied as fast as I could, looking for my truck keys. What do you mean? You were just talking with her. I could see the confusion on her face. There's no one home. We need to leave now. I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I see my dog shaking on the couch and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. Are we leaving? Sarah said, still confused. No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out. I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately. Emma, what's going on? She answers. Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up, you weren't there, I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay? What do you mean you heard from me? I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Sarah and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home. But before she did, you could hear something upstairs. Not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air. Like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next. And the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave just as quickly as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. Back in my first year at university, still figuring out the city life, my friend and I decided to hit the mall one evening. It was around 8 p.m. when we jumped on a bus my friend said would get us there. Around 10 p.m., we found ourselves stuck at this pretty empty bus spot. We waited for another bus, and the quiet around us started to feel weird. Out of the blue, this older dude showed up and said because it's late, we'd have to wait for at least an hour for another bus. He told us to hoof it down the road, and we'd find a bus stop in the middle where a bus would roll by soon. So we took his advice, walked down this narrow road with big trees on both sides. The dim glow from a few working streetlights gave the place a bit of an eerie vibe. The road was a bit slanted, and from where we stood, we could see all the way up and down. It was surrounded by trees for about a half a mile on both sides. As we stood there waiting, it hit us that both our phones were toast. Mine from a low battery, and my friend's left behind in her dorm. The feeling of being cut off got real as we grappled with the weird surroundings. Then, in the middle of our growing worry, 2 kids with backpacks came strolling down the road. Relief washed over us, and we went up to them with questions about the bus. The kids, around 12 or 13, a boy and a girl, seemed pretty normal, but things got weird real quick. While the boy checked his phone for bus info, I turned my head for a sec to talk to my friend. When I looked back to thank the boy, he and the girl were gone. Vanished. I swear I looked away for a second, and they were nowhere to be seen. We looked everywhere. Down the road, up the road, by the trees. They had a fence around them, so even if they went there, we would have seen them. I literally looked away for a second. Long story short, we were freaked out until our bus finally rolled in around 12:17 a.m. I remember because we asked the bus driver for the time. Later, I found out from my brother that the area had a graveyard, and it hit me. Why would 2 13-year-olds be out in the middle of nowhere, coming back from school at midnight? I never believed in spooky stuff, but I can't come up with a solid explanation for this one. And that wraps up this episode filled with chilling encounters and unexplained phenomena. I hope these eerie stories have left you captivated by the mysteries that hide in plain sight. If these tales have sent a shiver down your spine or left you intrigued, don't hesitate to hit that like button, subscribe for more thrilling adventures into the unknown, and share these mysteries with your fellow truth seekers. Stay tuned for our next journey into the enigmatic realms. Until then, keep your wits about you, stay curious, and always be on the lookout for the inexplicable. This is Miss Story Mystery signing off until our next thrilling exploration of the uncharted.